Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today is Tuesday, September 8th. I record these videos the day before, and as you know, yesterday was Labor Day, and so we didn't go into school, so I'm recording from my studio space at home. So this week's artist is amongst my personal favorite. He's a guy named Shaun Tan. He's an artist, writer, filmmaker. He's an Australian fella. He was born in 1974. He is alive and working today, still producing books and paintings and having exhibitions and holding shows. He uses pretty much every medium that you can imagine. So he does oil paint as his big primary. He'll also use colored pencils, pens, pencils, pastel, collage, and he even uses sculpture and photography to tell his stories. So his big thing is just telling these kind of crazy, outlandish tales using whatever medium he has. Tan's work oftentimes addresses racism, loneliness, family, fairy tales, immigration, childhood, our obliviousness as a species, animal rights, environmental exploitation, and the sense of belonging, just to name a few. He talks at length in an interview about how when he wrote his first book and had all of the illustrations with this book, he brought it to his publishers, and they're like, "Oh, this is a children's book," and he kind of paused, and he's like, "I see it more as like a book of fables for adults." And so that's a good description of how Tan produces and uses his work. So I'm going to show you a handful of these, and then just we're going to have a little bit of a different response to Tan's work this week. So this is nature. This is done with pastel on paper. Made this one 4 years ago. This is actually part of a series of about a dozen or so of these large pastel drawings of snails with different interpretations of things on their backs. And those of you who have had me in the past probably know that snails are one of my favorite creatures, and so I wanted to include this illustration of his, or this drawing of his, if you will. So this Tuesday afternoon reading group is a oil painting, and you can start to see really well his sense of atmosphere, his sense of space, as well as some of these kind of out of this world characters that he uses. And one big thing is he'll use realistic human or cartoon human stand-ins right alongside these strange creatures with water spigot heads or giant cyclops things with tiny wings. And so he creates these really whimsical creatures and whimsical characters. Studio Art 2 and Digital Art 2, you guys are going to be doing a lot of character design, so Tan might be someone that you pull inspiration from. But then the way he handles his medium really creates that sense of space. So we can see into this where this reading group is sitting on top of a hill overlooking a town with a factory in the distance, and we really get that sense that this could be a space that exists. One of his newer books, not his newest, but amongst his newer, is called The Singing Bones, and this is a series of sculptures that he made and photographed, and then actually paired them up with some of the Grimm fairy tale stories. And so he would take a line or a couple lines from one of those fairy tales and put that on one page alongside this sculpture that he created. And so these are tiny little, if any of you have played around with Sculpey clay, these are just out of Sculpey clay. And then he documents them and then uses that clay for the next piece. So this one's the Frog King, and you can see that illustration or that artwork next to that story segment right there. Some of the Singing Bones, being the Grimm's fairy tales, get fairly dark, and so here's one of his small sculptures from that. And I'll move my face out of the way here so you can see this one. This is All We Ever Wanted. It's an oil painting. This is a fairly big one, but he in this series as well, was exploring using skulls in different forms. And so while normally when we think of like a dark background and a skull, we think of kind of this nightmarish scene, but he does a really good job at juxtaposing or putting things in weird positioning that we don't expect. So while we've got this really, really dark background and this skull, which generally represents death or mortality, we've got all of these bright flowers, we've got this man painting the skull, we've got this woman gardening, we've got this white donkey standing right there. And so there's a lot of brightness and happiness happening within this. And so there's this juxtaposition of what we expect as we look at this versus what we end up walking away with. And Tan's illustrations, his paintings, his drawings, his sculptures, as well as his stories themselves, do a really good job at pairing these two disparate thoughts and feelings within his work. This one is Empire, and this is an oil painting, again creating that sense of space, but then juxtaposing this giant enlarged chicken here. So I'm going to, in this assignment, drop a bunch of links. This is just this is a collection of Tan's books. Being one of my favorite guys, I actually have my own substantial little library of his. A lot of these are marked and annotated because I'll use them as things that I have my Art 3 and 4 students looking into, as well as annotating one of them and using it as the basis of an essay that I did during my MFA. But Tan has written and illustrated many books. All of these include both text and illustrations created. And so there will be a bunch of links in your assignment for this week. But what I want you to do is I want you to choose or do a Google search for Shaun Tan's work and find one piece that really kind of sticks out to you, or one piece that strikes you as interesting. And then I want you to spend 3 to 5 minutes just sitting there looking at that piece. And I actually want you to like set an alarm on your phone and then like look at or do nothing else other than just sit with a piece of his artwork. And as you do that, I want you to think about what your initial reactions to the piece were. I want you to think about what your reaction after sitting with that piece for 5 minutes was. And then I want you to look at and try to figure out what he did specifically within that piece that caused those two thoughts. So this should be 3 to 5 sentences. After you have chosen a piece of his to sit with and ponder and enjoy, tell us what you notice, how you respond to that, and then what Tan did in order to create that sense with you. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. If you need to talk through anything, you can come to Open Studios during your class period. That link will be in the playlist, and I will see you all on Thursday.